So good evening, everyone. We'll start our session this evening. Welcome to the very first community engagement introduction to the system of care in Medicine Hat. My name is Jaime Rogers. I am the manager of the Homeless and Housing Development Department with Medicine Hat Community Housing Society. This is the second time today that we are doing this presentation. We had a group of about 50 individuals earlier today that participated in this. It'll take approximately 45 minutes. With some time for Q&A at the end as well. So feel free to jump in and ask questions as we go. This is just an intro to the system of care in Medicine Hat. So first we want to start with our land acknowledgement. So we acknowledge that we are situated on Treaty 7 and neighbor to Treaty 4 territory, traditional lands of the Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, Stoney Nakoda, Tsuut'ina, as well as the Cree, Sioux, and the Saulteaux bands of the Ojibwa peoples. We also honor and acknowledge that we are on the homelands of the Métis Nation within Region 3. So thank you for borrowing your lands for us to do this today. So this will be our overview for today. Introduction, system of care, community-based organization, also known as a CBO, and community entity, CE. Our funded programs here in community, our shelter system, and then of course we'll close with questions and some Q&A. So introduction, homelessness, as we know, is in every community and it looks different in each community, whether that's a small rural and remote community or large centers such as Vancouver, Toronto, Glasgow, Edinburgh. Homelessness is experienced throughout the world, and it just looks a little bit different in each of those communities and jurisdictions. Ending homelessness is really a Government of Canada and a provincial government initiative. So that's the flow of funding. It also is obviously a municipal issue and a community issue as well. It's a community issue because they are our neighbors that are just not housed yet. The goal here is to facilitate and implement a system of care that actually addresses homelessness effectively in Medicine Hat in communities across Canada. So a little bit about the Medicine Hat Community Housing Society. The Medicine Hat Community Housing Society has been in existence for a very long time. It actually was two agencies that merged into one back in 2006. And one of the agencies was focused on social housing, the other one on homelessness. So the purpose of the Medicine Hat Community Housing Society is to provide access to affordable housing and supports. We have two core business functions. First, we are a housing programs. We are a housing management body that is appointed by ministerial order. We are not government. That's something people are very unaware of. We are a not-for-profit charitable organization. As a housing management body, we oversee social and affordable housing in our community, and we assist approximately 1,000 individuals every month in social housing units that are place-based housing units, as also with rent supplements. And what we're going to be talking about today is our homelessness initiatives. So we are established as the community-based organization, or CBO, and community entity for Medicine Hat. We lead and implement the local plan to end homelessness. The CBO language and CE language is just specific to provincial and federal terminology. In Medicine Hat, Meossin Friendship Center is the community entity for the Indigenous funding stream that is provided by Reaching Home under our federal government. So Medicine Hat Community Housing Society's organizational structure, we do have a board of directors, we have a chief administrative officer, and then we also have 5 distinct departments. The department that I oversee is the Homeless and Housing Development, which is circled in red there, and 3 employees. That used to only ever read 1 employee, so we've tripled in size. We have a finance department, we have a housing programs department. Now that department is in charge of the social housing and community, as well as affordable housing, and the wait list for individuals requiring that type of service. Facility operations is our maintenance department, and that department repairs the units that are overseen by the housing programs. And then we have our outreach department, and most people will know that department as Housing Link, or what's formerly called Central Intake. So the system of care in Medicine Hat, and as we are going through this is not the entire system of care in Medicine Hat. These are the programs and services that we fund directly. There is a plethora of other programs and services that really make our homeless serving system of care work, and we will be discussing those in a future webcast. So the system of care in Medicine Hat, I'm going to draw your attention to the bottom left of your screen and the foundational philosophies. We have many foundational philosophies that we use. One is housing first. that we are trauma-informed, we are harm reduction and recovery-based, and that we are also strength-based. So really you'll hear us say in media and stuff that, housing first is meeting people where that, and that it's a basic human right. Housing is a fundamental human right. So I'm going to go in a little bit just for context around what we mean by housing first. Usually when we do media things, we don't have more than a couple minutes, and it takes more than a couple minutes to explain what that actually is in the context of our plan to end homelessness and our systems planning work here in community. So housing first was really based on 5 core principles. First one is immediate access to permanent housing with no housing readiness requirements. That means providing individuals, service participants, or clients with assistance in finding and obtaining safe and secure housing. And that housing needs to be permanent for them. The key to the housing first philosophy is that individuals and families are not required to demonstrate that they are quote unquote ready for services. Them coming and asking for assistance or needing assistance is sufficient enough to let us know that they are ready. Program participation is voluntary. That's why we say service participants. It is not, we are not compliance-based programming with that. The second key element for housing first is choice. You hear us talk about choice. So the choice and client self-determination is imperative to the success of any system of care. So housing first is a rights-based, client-centered approach that emphasizes client choice in terms of both housing and supports. So in Medicine Hat, choice of housing is really important. We know that when people are able to select the type of housing that they want to live in or that they have preference with, that they will actually look at those units a little bit differently and situate themselves a little bit differently. However, choice is also constrained by local availability and also affordability. So we do factor that in as well. Client choice in supports means that clients do have the choice in what types of services they require and need, and when to start using those services, and to the degree that they want to engage in those services. The third element of our Housing First programming is recovery orientation. So Housing First is not just simply focused on housing individuals and meeting their very basic needs. It's about supporting them in a recovery model, whatever that looks like for them. So it focuses on the individual well-being and ensures that the clients have access to a range of supports to enable them to nurture, maintain recreational, social, occupational, and vocational interests that they may or may not have at this time. For those individuals that do have challenges with addictions, recovery orientation also means access to harm reduction environments and supplies and tools. And really harm reduction aims just to lessen the risk of harmful effects associated with substance abuses and addictive behaviors that people present with. Recognizing that we hope that people will eventually get to a point of being recovery and abstinence-based, but it is on their own terms. Fourth element is individualized and client-driven supports. So it is a client-driven approach that recognizes that individuals are unique, and so are all their needs. And those needs can change over time. So once housed, some people will need minimum supports, while other people will need supports for the rest of their lives. So it's not just about getting people in and getting them out, it's about getting them in, really assessing what their level of need is. And some people we will need to support for the entirety of their lives, because that is the level of need that and support that they are requiring. The center kind of philosophy to Housing First is that people have access to the supports they need if they choose to access them. So when we talk about gaps in community and gaps in services, if those supports are not available, that means that the community needs to collectively come together and find a way to make sure those supports are there. Some time ago, for those of you in community a little bit longer, if you remember a time when we didn't have a recovery center in our community, and the strong advocacy work that this community as a whole did around that huge gap in service and need. And now we're seeing other areas that we need to maybe mobilize around and advocate a little bit more strongly too. So it's really hard to have a housing first philosophy and really do that, and that they're client-driven supports when the supports may not be there. The fifth one is, and the last one around housing first, is that it's social and community integration. We need to support people to integrate into their community, and it requires a socially supportive environment and engagement, and the opportunity for individuals to actually participate in our local community in meaningful ways. If people are housed and become or remain socially isolated, the stability of their housing is compromised, and it drastically declines the overall well-being of that individual. The second point on our foundational philosophies is trauma-informed. So trauma-informed care is an approach that embraces an understanding of trauma at every step of service delivery. It's a model that requires compassion and an understanding attitude in order to address the intersecting effects of trauma on individuals' lives. It is a very collaborative approach with the service participant and those supports that are wrapped around that individual. Trauma-informed care seeks to first realize the widespread impact of trauma and understand the paths for recovery. Many of the individuals that are within the homeless serving system of care end up in that state because of their trauma. And whether that is from childhood trauma, or as many of you are learning about residential school trauma, about where you come from even, and it might be culture trauma as well, for those maybe new Canadians or just new to the homeless serving system even, job loss, family breakdown. Those are all traumatic events and they impact us all very, very differently. So this approach and really meeting people where they are at factors the whole person into this. It also recognizes the signs and symptoms of trauma in service participants and staff members that are there to support individuals. If the staff are there and getting triggered by trauma, by hearing stories, etc., we need to make sure the staff are supported as well as the clients or service participants. It also serves to integrate knowledge about trauma into policies, procedures, and the actual practice that we do. And probably one of the most important things about having a trauma-informed lens and a trauma-informed approach to the work we do, we need to actively avoid re-traumatizing individuals. You will hear this said a lot. We don't want people to have to continually tell their stories over and over and over again. It is traumatizing. And it's especially traumatizing when they've told their story many times and nothing has been done that is actually assisting them through that stage of their life. And whether that's around getting access to mental health supports or addiction support, or reconnecting with family or education even, or just getting housing, just to be heard. We don't want to re-traumatize individuals and perpetuate that cycle and system of re-traumatizing. The third bullet is harm reduction. So it's an approach or strategy aimed at reducing the risk of harmful effects associated with substance use and addictive behaviors for the individual, the community, and society as a whole. So a really good example of what this is just in terms of, I'm going to say needle exchange, just as a really basic one. It's an area that is near and dear to my heart. I used to work in that field, especially harm reduction. So we're not getting into whether it's right or wrong. The idea of having safe needles is around protecting and not transmitting HIV or Hep C. Having places where individuals can safely put those needles is protecting the community, because then we typically don't have children or others picking up needles or coming across them. And then it's around the education component of that as well. And also getting people connected to supports and services to eventually stop that addictive behavior and the drug use as well. So that's basically how that harm reduction works. It recognizes that abstinence may neither be realistic or a desirable goal for individuals, for some people, especially if they're in the short term and they're experiencing trauma. The use of substances is accepted as a fact, and the main focus is placed on reducing the harm while the use continues, and eventually we will hopefully get to a recovery stage. So that is the basis of our harm reduction. Strength-based practice and focus that we base our system of care on means that approach values the capacity, skills, knowledge, connections, and potential of all individuals that we serve and the community that we serve as well. It does focus on strengths, but it doesn't mean that we don't also ignore challenges or that we spin struggle into strength either. It's about being really honest about what people are great at. We have a lot of people within our homeless serving system right now that have either gone through our system or that are currently in our system or that we're hoping to get into our system and get housed, that have such resiliency and such entrepreneurship spirit and are very dedicated and motivated, and they are great friends and leaders. So really framing that as a strength and not without its struggle though. So we have to really balance that out as we talk about strength-based and the approaches that we take. Taking a strength-based approach also allows collaboration as a way to work with that individual and those other supports that assist that individual to do things for themselves. But it's around those wraparound supports for individuals. So that's really our foundational philosophies. When we look at our role as community-based organization or a community entity, again, this is a function that is done by my department, so the Homeless and Housing Development Department. We receive 2 streams of funding. The first stream of funding that we receive, and we receive these on an annual basis, the Government of Alberta Outreach Support Service Initiative. We get $3.1 million invested into community annually. Of that, their department receives 10% of administration dollars on that. And that is a contract year over year that's renewed with the provincial government. We also receive Government of Canada Reaching Home funding. So this is the counterpart to the Indigenous community entity funding that Austin oversees in community as well. So we received $500,000, and this one is actually a 5-year contract. Federal government was really fantastic, taking leadership roles back in 2019 and did a 5-year contract with community entities. For quite some time, there were 61 community entities across Canada, and that has expanded tremendously, where we now have rural and remote communities, as well as Indigenous communities that are delivering on behalf of their people as well. And the central goal of both these funding streams is end homelessness in the community. And we do that through good systems planning and taking a housing first philosophy and approach to the work that we do. What you will not see on here right now, but will be later in another slide, is around our COVID-19 pandemic response from both the provincial government and the federal government as well. We just received a little bit of an increase in funding and some extension of that. So I'll go into that in a slide in a bit here. So with all this money, who decides what gets funded in community? There is a long process for this. I see some folks on the line that have actually gone through our RFP process and that have done exceptionally well with this. So what we need to do first is we actually do a community assessment of need. And that takes on a couple different modes and models of how we actually do that. First and foremost, lived experience voice. We do a lot of one-on-one engagement for those that are actually using the system, to design systems and services without having those that are actually experiencing it would be faltering. It's like sitting behind a desk and making decisions that are not impactful to the people that it's actually intended to serve. We do focus groups, have to change that up a little bit just in the last year with COVID, but it's still doable. We meet with our community partners or our funded agencies to look first and foremost if they need increases or any shifts in their funding so that they can better serve more effectively the people that they are already serving. And then we use our data quite heavily, and it is the data that our programs put into the database that we look at first and foremost. We look at the overall trends in community across the province as well. I'm just getting a sign that my internet connection is unstable. So if I bump out, I will be back. My apologies. So when we establish what the needs are in community, we do what's called a request for proposals or a call for proposals where we invite community to submit. We don't have limitations on who can apply for funding. So it can be a not-for-profit, it can be a business, it can be a church as well in faith-based community, as long as they meet certain thresholds, and it depends on what type of funding it is based on what the provincial or federal government is requiring us to do. We do follow the New West Partnering Trade Agreement or NUWAPTA, as well as the Government of Alberta and Government of Canada requirements if they have any procurement requirements. For example, just a really quick one is under the Government of Canada one, anything over $25,000 we must put out to tender versus say $75,000 under the GOA and the NUWAPTA agreements as well. So there is a lot of technical stuff behind the scenes before it actually gets to the public consumption stage. So we have an RFP out. What happens next is qualified agencies or businesses will apply for the funding. We have a short limit on our proposals. We don't want to read 400 pages. We like to know what good work is happening and that the agencies can deliver on a specific service. We do always look for innovation in applications and how they're going to do things not differently, but maybe better or more effectively again. And sometimes that's taking innovative approaches in delivery. We take those proposals and we vet them through what's called our Community Council on Homelessness, or CCH. that serves as our Community Advisory Board, or a CAB. So the funding recommendations are reviewed and recommended by this council, which is made up of community stakeholders, and then it ultimately goes to the Medicine Hat Community Housing Society Board of Directors for final approval. So no, I don't make decisions on who gets funded and how much people get funded. That has gone through transparent procurement processes. So what is our role as a community-based organization or community entity? So we have 5 core things that we look at and that we are kind of here to serve. Yes, our role is to look at system planning to work at ending homelessness. So systems planning and integration is the first one. Community development and leadership. We have local decision making, coordination of data management across the community, and of course, fund administration. So in our role as systems planners, which you will hear us talk quite a bit about in terms of what we do, you hear us say CBO, systems planner. We work across different sectors: health, justice, education, and housing. To end homelessness, it's not just around housing an individual. Those wraparound supports are required and needed to look at how those individuals reach their full capacity. When we talk about health and justice as well, it's around discharge planning, coordinating transition out of those systems as well. We do a lot of collaboration and consultation and engagement with all stakeholders and community as well. And that's to get a good gauge on how systems are operating and where maybe we need to improve our systems to coordinate and interface with the other systems as well. So it's not a one-way street. It's around how do we all do better to coordinate systems differently. We also focus on capacity building initiatives, training, technical assistance for the sector as well. Under local decision making, it's local autonomy that is absolutely essential to be successful at the local level. We facilitate community decisions impacting community outcomes. So I mentioned our Community Council on Homelessness. Sorry about that. It's around the decisions of what to fund. We get pots of money essentially, and it comes to community. Community makes the decision about what this community needs. The unfortunate thing is we can't fund everything that we would like to fund. It is always oversubscribed by millions and millions of dollars. So with our funding that we do have in community, we look at investment areas and maybe where we can make a huge impact in terms of system utilization and impact on other systems as well. These are not decisions that are being decided in Edmonton or Calgary. The decisions made at the Medicine Hat level by local decision makers. For community development and leadership, we oversee of service providers, community capacity building in relation to ending homelessness across the system. And this is not just for our service providers. We do have a rule that if we're offering training and programs and services, we want our peripheral services that we don't fund also to come to the table and learn with us. We know that, like any event, sometimes it's not the actual training that you're going through, unless it's this one that you're on right now, but it's about who else is in the room and the conversations that happen as well. And that is the value of having shared learning models as well. Some of the training that we offer to our service providers, we have core training that is mandatory, and we also have supplemental training. So these are expected practices across our entire system because we want to have consistency of care and we want to actually professionalize the services that we offer. And in order for us to professionalize the services, we need to ensure that people are trained to a high degree. And if they come educated as well, paper education is one thing. You have to be good in practice as well, though, not just good on paper in terms of credentials. So having that professional development that we all go through is critical to that professionalization of all of our services and to increase our knowledge and understanding as well. We do community and stakeholder engagement, of course, planning and reporting back to the community. So this one's specific to our, we do a lot of focus groups, a lot of community engagement. We just had one at the end of May. End of April for our community partners, because we will be receiving an additional $500,000 from our federal government. And we really wanted to touch base with our community partners first and foremost to look at what the level of need is in community, and if we can look at some gaps in services, and then tailor that RFP, or request for proposals I talked about, so that we can actually meet some gaps in our community and serve people better. When we report back to community, that can be found on our website. And we do hold one big event every year, and it's called our Community Celebration. We'll be holding our 11th Community Celebration on July 16th. And just due to restrictions still, we have to modify it a little bit. So we'll be having Ian DeYoung with Orcode Consulting doing a virtual keynote address with some other guests that we have. And then we'll be having a community barbecue at Veterans Park, commencing at 11:30 a.m. on the 16th. And we invite everyone to attend. It is open to the public. Coordination of data management. We are very reliant on data and the importance of data in analyzing and evaluating not just our program efficiency, but our system efficiency as well is a really important component here. We're known for making data-informed decisions and using evidence-based practices in all the work that we do. Data is huge for our community. It's how good systems are built, and it's also how we dismantle some of our systems, even the ones that we create, because if the data is telling us a different story, we can't ignore that. The data is not subjective to things, it's very objective, it's just in the numbers, and it's not that people are numbers, we say that people are not numbers, but the data represents the people we serve. And if there's not sufficient data to make good decisions, we have faltered somewhere. We are also the FOIP lead, so Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy for all of our funded programs and services. So we do a lot of reporting and investigating of privacy breaches with the FOIP office, with the Government of Alberta, as well as the Privacy Commissioner's Office. So we do have breach protocol that we adhere to and train diligently on. We are also a fund administrator. We talked quite extensively about this already, again, using data to make decisions. And ensure that the funding is holistic, inclusive, sustainable, and that we actually support all of our different communities to serve clients and participants throughout our community. We do advocate and we really push federal and provincial government for additional funding and sustained funding as well. We have various programs and services that we invest in, and that has changed over time. We are one of the few communities in Canada that has gone from funding 3 Housing First programs to 1. And when we have a reduction in service, one of the key elements is that sometimes we need to stop funding things that are maybe not having impact anymore. We need to start investing in other initiatives. So we know as a community, as we plan, if we see some services are maybe not requiring at a certain level, or some maybe need to increase a little bit, we can adjust that and plan with that with our community partners. Typically, not receiving funding is not a surprise. Either the program has brought it up, or we received a significant decrease in funding that we help communicate that out to our community partners as well. Our goal is always to improve current programs and systems or stop funding them altogether. So some other initiatives that maybe people don't know we're involved in is we are leading, along with our Systems Innovators Group, Medicine Hat Systems Transformation Project. This is really looking at our system of care and looking at how we can kind of dismantle some of our own programs that we created, quite frankly. It's looking at not offering people programs, but offering people service elements to actually meet their needs. And it's about making sector connectors. And it's also about ensuring that we transform our entire system of care, because we can have a lot of investment of funds, but are they always effective and are they always achieving their outcomes? So it's really taking a hard look at that and seeing how we can improve that overall as a community. We're also on the Built for Zero Canada and participate in that quite heavily. And this is around functional zero and our recent announcement of ending homelessness, achieving functional zero chronic homelessness, folks. So yes, we do still have individuals in our community experiencing homelessness. This is around individuals that are chronically homeless. So we are working with Built for Zero Canada right now to look at new definitions of what it actually means to end homelessness for all community members. I'm going to mute for a second, pardon me. Thank you, I was just wetting my whistle. We're also led the Thrive initiative. So this is a poverty reduction strategy. and increasing, so it's reducing poverty and increasing well-being for members of Medicine Hat and region. This program specifically launched and then it has come back a little bit, but that document is still well in use and well in effect. It's probably one of the better poverty reductions throughout Canada. So we can see some work trickling in. Our systems transformation stuff works with that. Our homeless serving sector works with that. Food security is already in there. So it is still a very essential document for our community. We also just released the Medicine Hat housing strategy in partnership with a lot of community partners. Meowson Friendship Centers there, the City of Medicine Hat, Invest Medicine Hat, Canadian Mortgage Housing Corporation's out there, the Home Builders Association, and a lot of other great community partners that I will fail to acknowledge and address as well. The Real Estate Board, Cypress View Foundation as well. So yeah, there were some really great community partners at that table that helped to launch that, and that was released just on June 7th. We also support the housing development in community and assist with data or proposal writing as well. Having this document, the housing strategy as well, is going to be huge for our community because it will actually show the level of need. And that housing strategy is special because it goes everywhere from homelessness up to market housing and executive housing. So it's a fulsome housing strategy, not just low income. Also participate heavily with 7 Cities on Housing and Homelessness that has existed since the beginning of time, I'm fairly sure. And that group has been instrumental in ensuring that there's continued funding and advocacy work around homelessness throughout Alberta, as well as the federal level as well. And in my spare time, I love sitting on the Community Foundation of Southeast Alberta and their grant review committee. I really do love RFPs and procurement and love that I get to participate with a great group of people in that perspective. Our funded programs. I'm going to briefly go through our funded programs, just so people know what we actually invest in community. And I know on our website is www.mhchs.ca. In there, we will be uploading our chart of what is funded and where they are funded out of. So our CBO CE funded program, so this is both federal and provincial funding. So under our Housing First programming, we actually have 3 identified Housing First type programs in our community. We have, let me just go over here. We have our Medicine Hat Women's Shelter Society that delivers our One Housing First program. We have Housing Link, operated by the Medicine Hat Community Housing Study Outreach Department. And then we also have Permanent Supportive Housing from the Canadian Mental Health Association. And I'll go into each of these programs a little bit more in the next slides. Under our addiction and recovery supports, we have cultural addictions counseling that is from Meowson Friendship Center. We also have Links House, which is a recovery and stabilization program operated by McMahon. Under our youth supports, we have the Youth Hub Outreach Program, as well as the Roots Youth Shelter, again, both operated by McMahon. Other supports on the bottom, we have 3 supports, and these ones are actually delivered by my department directly, so by the CBO and CE, and that is the Graduate Rental Assistance Initiative, also called GRAY, Community Capacity Building, and Centralized Rental Supports. So I will go into each one of those shortly. Under our CBO CE funded programs and specific to COVID-19 pandemic responses, we actually have 5 things that were funded through this. So when the pandemic hit, we first received funding from the federal government through the COVID-19 emergency response. With that money, as a community again, and as a collective of stakeholders, we opted to keep that money held with the CBO CE, and all programs and services that we fund, or even if we didn't fund, so like the Salvation Army, we don't fund directly, they could access funding through that. We purchased things such as porta potties when everything closed and there's no public places for individuals to go to the washroom when they had to leave shelter in the morning. We purchased PPE. We purchased a lot of things that was available, cleaning supplies, obviously, different clothing for workers at the very onset when we didn't quite know what we were dealing with, additional support workers as well, some security in some places that required it. So that fund was a come and go with our community partners that they could just access that funding and we'd reimburse them for any services. Also some travel stuff as well when individuals needed to return or also be in isolation. We then got additional money from our provincial government to support with the initiatives. And then we received another influx of money from our federal government as well. So I believe with our federal government, we got just over $617,000. And through our provincial government, we just have a new contract into the end of September, and that was approximately $250,000. So we also fund social services at the Medicine Hat Library through our COVID-19 response. And this one is slated to go to June 30th, however, may be able to be extended because they had to close down for many months. So this is one program that we just got up and running, and due to restrictions had to close down very quickly. So we'll be working with Ken and the great people at the library to have that discussion about maybe stretching those dollars a little bit further. We also funded Food Connection with the Medicine Hat District Food Bank. Food Bank has been tremendous and has walked alongside us the entire time. And this was about delivery of food for individuals when they could not leave their home or should not have left their home, ensuring that people, especially all those in our programs, had access to food as well. We also have our COVID-19 isolation units for vulnerable population. This is operated by McMahon. This is 6 units of self-isolation units, essentially. Small rooms, staff are on site. It's for individuals that are experiencing homelessness and cannot isolate because they don't have a home to isolate in, quite frankly. So this is available to them. So if they are symptomatic, we arrange for testing through community paramedics. And we make sure that we assist them with medication, access to doctors, any cultural supports that they need. And we've had a lot of individuals that have had to go into isolation because they're symptomatic. We have been exceptionally fortunate in our community that we have had very minimal COVID positive individuals that have been homeless. We had one individual in a shelter, in a women's shelter actually, and then we just had our first individual within our other shelters that was actually our first positive case. Ironically, at the very end of our pandemic, or the restrictions with our pandemic, I should say, that individual's doing okay though. Our COVID-19 emergency daytime shelter, I think is one of the programs that has been talked a lot about in the last 6 or so months. The emergency shelter was developed and designed only because of the operating hours of the Center of Hope, which is our adult shelter. Individuals were required to be out during the daytime from 7:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. And there was no safe place for individuals to go during the pandemic. So again, while you or I could go home, there was no place for individuals to get their very basic needs met. Typically, when we have services opened up, they will go on a circuit, they will go to see their workers, they will actively work on housing, they will get connected to supports. Their typical day, what you or I maybe would do as well, or work. Some of them are working right now, and those options were not available to them. This is located on North Railway, and this program will not be operating after September 30th. So that is a for sure thing. We have no intentions of extending that service beyond that. I will take this time right now to, actually no, I'm going to wait till the end in the shelter system. I'll share some news with people. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our programs now. Housing Link is operated by the Medicine Hat Community Housing Society Outreach. This is our central intake process for those experiencing homelessness in community. They go do intakes and assessments in office, over the phone, in corrections, at the shelters. They will go anywhere and do an assessment with an individual. Very simple, 45 minutes. Housing Link is recognized as our coordinated access system in our community. And this is something around coordinated access that we will be working with our Indigenous partners in Meowson around coordinated access system and really indigenizing our entire system of care and looking at how we can make improvements in those areas. Within Housing Link itself, 3 core functions. One is that individual assessment and getting people to the right programs. The second thing that they do is they actually have an internal program called Rapid Resolution. It's for individuals that are low to moderate need, that are actually experiencing homelessness, and that maybe don't need a caseworker, that they're just struggling a little bit. So we don't want to overserve people. So they get supports for approximately 4 to 6 months. Sometimes it's only a couple weeks. It's really based on that individualized supports and services. And typically individuals are housed in community. It's a scattered site approach is what it's called, where we use market housing to house and support individuals. The third part of what Housing Link does is actually called housing loss prevention. And this is really unique to us. It's a great program. It's for individuals that are actually already housed and they have a notice to vacate. So it's what we classify as imminent risk of becoming homeless. So housing stabilization is the go. This is a one-time financial assistance to help that individual or family pay their arrears so that they can actually stay housed. We know that if we assist individuals to stay housed, it costs the system far less, and we don't want to traumatize that individual having to come into a system of care that a rental arrears check or a month's payment of they're behind on the rent, that just pay it and hopefully those other issues will not be prevalent. They also have the opportunity to talk to a caseworker if they do need additional supports as well. Housing First program operated by the Medicine Hat Women's Shelter Society. This is one of our long-standing programs in community. It's for individuals whose needs are moderate to more significant. They need more supports to help sustain their housing. They're housed in community, again, scatter site model with intensive case management supports. Caseworker helps with goal setting, finance management, food planning as well, and connection to other services. And when we talk about individualized supports, some of the things that people will look at for goals, housing stability has to be one of the goals that people need to work towards. Sometimes we have throughout our program, some of the goals that people work on are family reunification. Sometimes it's holding a job or volunteering. Sometimes, and we've had a lot of people, and this is something community will get to know about, a lot of people that go back to school and go back to college and are doing really well for themselves from that aspect, and they're happier and healthier and giving back to community as well. So that looks very different for everyone. Sometimes it's people learning to write and learn how to read. Sometimes it's very basic things that we maybe take for granted, and sometimes it's very monumental things that are life-changing. So it's really meeting individuals where they are at and really honoring their journey with them. The average length of time that someone would go into this program is approximately 12 to 18 months. And then after that, individuals would leave this program. In all of our programs and services, and this is not something I shared earlier, at any time, because these are all voluntary services, that individual service participant or client can fire their worker. They can fire their worker at any time for any reason, and we allow them to come back to the program or service within 3 months, very little questions asked. They go back directly to their case manager and resume their work. If it's beyond that time, they come back through a housing link, again, our coordinated access system. And we allow that because people are allowed to make choices. And sometimes, depending on where they're at in their lives, the timing might not be optimal for them, or they maybe want to engage in other activities or services and explore other options for them as well. Our permanent supportive housing program operated by the Canadian Mental Health Association is a, oh, sorry guys. It's for individuals that are in high need and that are more complex. We call it having a concurrent disorder is kind of the technical term that we go by. They have 2 or more presenting issues that they need assistance with. The permanent supportive housing is operated as a 24/7 supportive living environment. We do have staff on site 24/7. The degree of staff varies depending on the time of day. Each individual has an intensive case manager that again works with them with their finance management, with food planning, with the goals that they're supportive housing, that to stay. The level of tolerance in this building, and I say tolerance, I actually don't like that word, but the threshold of accepting behaviors. We do also offer a scatter site approach within this housing, where people are supported in the community and they can try it in that fashion. If not, they can also move back into the building as well. There are 30 units of permanent supportive housing available. This program falls under, and their lease agreements fall under what's called the residential. We'll go into more about this program in a later webinar, so people can understand the full nature of what this program does, and more importantly, what it does not do. Our graduate rental assistance initiative called the GRAY. This is a rent subsidy for individuals that have graduated from Housing First or Rapid Rehousing, or PSH sometimes. And that they just need that financial assistance. So what it does is it creates a flow of individuals so that they don't have to maintain on caseload. In each of our programs and services, for individuals that are receiving maybe an age benefit or income support based on your family or unit size and the type of house, of $30 for core shelter, which is not sufficient enough to get a rental, any rental accommodation here in Medicine Hat or any other community for that. Line items built in that we do top up people's rent. We don't pay for full rent unless that individual is contributing to their rent as well. So we do have that. So the gray assistance is for those individuals that still need that rental support that can't qualify under the housing management body yet. So that's the other side of that business that we do for that type of program and service as well. I just heard that I'm garbled on the screen. Is that better, folks? Chloe? Okay, we'll try that now. Is that better?
That sounds better, Jamie.
Is that a little better, folks?
Yeah.
Thank you. I just bellered at my kid to come up. I'm on her hotspot. Is that better? Okay.
Yeah.
You can go back a little bit, folks, or we're good? We'll go. So cultural addiction to counseling, this is our Meowson Friendship Center. This is a great program. It's for individuals who struggle with addiction issues and want a holistic approach to healing. So it really does focus on Indigenous culture, traditions, practices, and pathways to healing. This was something identified in community quite some time ago, and that as much as we can have I'm going to say mainstream addictions workers, there wasn't one with that cultural focus to healing and looking at the trauma and everything that comes with that. So Meowson does a fantastic job of this program. Meowson also provides transitional housing. This shouldn't say while waiting for treatment, but they all offer transitional housing in their facility down by our building actually. And they also offer one family housing unit in community as well. Links House is our recovery and stabilization units. This is for individuals that are 18 plus, operated by McMahon, provide safe, supportive, sober, abstinence-based short-term housing while the individual is waiting for treatment. So this means that they have detoxed and are waiting for a treatment bed, or the individuals that have gone through treatment and are waiting to transition back into community. This is a great partnership directly with Alberta Health Services and the Recovery Center, and it is open to everyone. There's 9 beds available. This is a program that just got launched at the start of the pandemic, so they have not had time to flourish and really show the impact that they can do. Youth Hub Outreach, again, operated by McMahon. So youth up to the age of 24 that are experiencing or at risk of homelessness, focuses on appropriate housing or rehousing of youth. McMahon does a great job of family reunification and that family mediation work as well. McMahon also operates the Ruth Youth Shelter, which I'll talk a little bit about in the next couple slides. But the Youth Hub Outreach does access the youth at the shelter for additional supports as well. So our shelters in Medicine Hat. So Medicine Hat has 3 emergency shelters. We will always need emergency shelters in our community. What is key is that we don't have emergency shelters that people live at because we create robust systems of care for people to quickly transition out of those shelters and into their own housing. First shelter that we have on our list here is the Salvation Army Center of Hope. It's for adults 18 plus experiencing homelessness in our community. There are 30 beds of emergency shelter. This is a little bit reduced during COVID, of course. They do referrals to housing supports as well. This shelter specifically is funded by the Government of Alberta and Community and Social Services Ministry. We also have our Medicine Hat Women's Shelter Society Phoenix Safe House. It's for any individual or family fleeing family violence or domestic violence. Also has 30 emergency beds, a little bit reduced during COVID, but we should see that change shortly. They offer meals, support, information, safety planning, referrals to community resources as well. This shelter is funded again by the Government of Alberta Community and Social Services Ministry. We have the Roots Youth Shelter, which I talked briefly about. They're for youth at risk of experiencing homelessness. They have 4 emergency beds, and it's for individuals that are either community-based youth experiencing homelessness or youth that are actually connected with children's services interventions. So youth that are maybe already connected in with the system, but they have a bed there as well. They do obviously emergency housing, home placement, care, and supports focused on family reunification. This shelter is funded by the Government of Alberta Children's Services as well as the CBO. So we fund this to the tune of $200,000 every year as well. I will share this now. The Salvation Army shelter will be extending their hours effective the 28th, so I think next Monday, in our community. And this will actually help with the daytime sheltering and some other issues that we're having, I know with community partners and just the downtown in general right now. So the extension of the Salvation Army shelter will be from 7:30 p.m. to 11:30 a.m. Monday through Sunday, I guess. 7 days a week, they'll be extending their hours. This also allows, with the extension of the hours, Housing Link, which is again is our coordinated access system, will be on site at the shelter Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. to work directly with those individuals still in shelter and really encourage them to be more housing focused and really take down any barriers for lack of engagement if there is any. So really exciting for our community. It's a good shift and a good change, and it's been about 1.5 years in the making. So in closing, are there any questions, folks?
Yeah, hey, I had one.
Who's speaking, please? I cannot see.
Chance.
Hey, Chance.
Hey, I just want to say, first of all, great presentation, because I'm a student, and I know it's hard to do Zoom ones, because, you know, you're talking to a blank screen, but...
Thank you for that.
But I was wondering, too, with the announcement about the end of chronic homelessness, in a lot of ways, how do you go about collecting data on that? Because, you know, homeless people can be sometimes like invisible to the community supports.
Yeah, they can be. That's a really great question. So what we base that on is we use a system called Efforts to Outcomes. It's called ETO for short. And that is what's called our HMIS system, Homeless Management Information System. So we will typically know the names of every individual that has experienced homelessness in our community dating back to 2013. So whether they briefly touched the system or are still in the system, we typically will know who they are. If they have even linked remotely with either Housing Link or my department itself, we will know who they are. So we really take pride in knowing not just the numbers of people, but also their names as well. As long as people are connecting to some part of our system, we will know who they are and kind of what their level of support and need is. When we look at our chronic homeless, that is just a definitional, and it's about the duration and frequency of someone's homelessness that is well documented at the time of intake for services. So it's not a long process to figure that out, but it is it's a technical process, and it's a standardized process, not just across Medicine Hat, but actually across Alberta and the rest of Canada as well. So for those that are experiencing maybe hidden homeless or couch surfing, if they come in and access, we will know about them, even if they just briefly stop in. So to give you just a really high level overview, you'll hear in our community announcement, we've, of the 1,300 people that we've housed, that number is actually quite underreported because that is just individuals within the Housing First programs. We have over 4,000 unique individuals in our system of care. And whether those individuals needed a full Housing First program or just went through diversion or rapid resolution or referred to another agency, that's where we actually get the richness of our data. Did that answer your question, Chance?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So we can wait for a few more questions as we're waiting. I am always reminded to invite you to the next round learning session. And as we go through the learning sessions, the next one is around the who, what, why, when, where, etc., of ending homelessness. So that will go into a little bit more of that detail that you're talking about, Chance, and kind of what that looks like, how we define it, kind of what the difference is from 2015 to now, where we still need to go as a community, what's kind of lacking as well, and really around the why component of that. And we are hoping to have just a different flair to that one. So I know that is available for registration now. Week 3 is going to be by far my favorite one, and that's dispelling myths. So we bring forward all those questions that people say, yeah, but I thought you said, or why do we still see homeless people on the street? Or, you know, the question always is are you sure they're homeless? And do you know their name? And those types of things. And we'll dispel some myths as well.
Jamie, it's Marlene here.
Hi, Marlene.
I didn't get the ages for the Roots Youth Shelter.
So the youth shelter, so that will go up to only age 18. After 18, they will go to the adult shelter. At age 18, they'll go to the adult shelter. The Youth Hub Outreach Services does serve up to 24 though.
It does serve up to 24. That's what I thought. Okay.
Youth Hub Outreach does, the youth shelter does not.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I think we'll make this slide available to everyone as well. Or not the slide, the entire presentation as well. We'll post it on our website. After I fixed me Austin's little typo there. Are there any other questions, folks? I can stare in silence a very long time.
Hi, Jamie. I don't have any questions, but thank you for this presentation. It was very informative, and I've definitely learned something, so thank you.
You are most welcome. Thank you, Danielle. With that, I'll wish people a very good evening, and I hope to see you on our next learning session. Take care.
Thank you, Jamie.